Now let's move on to the second part of the unit, European exploration in the Americas. While Columbus gets all the credit for discovering America, he only showed up in 1492. Fun fact, around the year 1000, Norse Vikings had already visited Greenland and part of North America, including what we now call Canada. They even set up short-lived colonies, like the one in Newfoundland. Picture it, Eric the Red and his son Leif Erikson, the original father-son adventure duo. But harsh conditions and the lack of resources meant these Viking colonies were more like historical one-hit wonders. Fast forward 500 years, and Europeans were motivated to explore the Americas again, thanks to what I'd like to call the indirect discoverers. The Crusaders, after tasting the exotic spices of Asia, got Europe hooked on finding a cheaper route to Asia's wealth. Marco Polo's adventures to China in the 13th century further fueled this ambition. Though neither the Crusaders nor Marco Polo reached the Americas, their tales made them the hype man for European exploration. Take a look at this map of the world as known to Europeans before Columbus' 1492 voyage. They knew about lands east to East Asia and Southeast Asia, but the Pacific was a mystery. To the west, their knowledge extended to Greenland and West Africa. But the Atlantic was an uncharted ocean. It was like having a world map with a giant "Here be dragons" sign over the Atlantic, and Columbus was the guy brave or crazy enough to say, "Let's find out if that's true." Oceanic exploration was perilous and expensive, so what on earth caused Columbus and other Europeans to take this leap? It wasn't just a case of "I wonder what's over there." By the Renaissance in the 14th century, Europe experienced significant changes in thought. Think of the Renaissance as Europe's midlife crisis, but instead of buying sports cars, they nurtured an ambitious spirit of optimism and adventure. New technologies also emboldened Europeans. They included the development of gunpowder boom, the sailing compass, so they didn't get hopelessly lost, shipbuilding because you need something that floats, and map making so they could brag about their discoveries. The invention of the printing press in the 1450s facilitated the spread of knowledge, making exploration more feasible. It was the original social media. If social media were printed on paper and took weeks to spread news. European exploration was driven by a mix of religious, political, and economic motivations. Christianity, especially after the Protestant Reformation, emphasized missionary work. Imagine a giant celestial PR campaign, convert now, ask questions later. Religious conflicts in Europe also spurred a desire to spread their faith. In the 15th century, the Roman Catholic Church faced threats from Muslim Ottoman Turks and rebellious Christians. The union of Isabella I of Castile and Ferdinand II of Aragon created a unified Spain, boosting Catholic power and missionary zeal. It was like the original power couple launching a faith-based enterprise. The Protestant Reformation sparked a series of religious wars, with both Catholics and Protestants eager to spread their versions of Christianity. Think of it as the ultimate theological bake-off, with each side determined to win the grand prize of global influence. Monarchs of emerging nation-states like Spain, Portugal, France, and England sought to justify their rule and generate revenue through trade and church support. They were like, how can we make our kingdoms even cooler? I know, let's discover some new real estate. Mercantilism, the new economic policy of the time, emphasized economic self-sufficiency and wealth accumulation through colonies and favorable trade balances. And the Ottoman Turks' blockade of traditional trade routes to Asia made Asian goods even more expensive, pushing Europeans to find new paths. Imagine trying to buy your favorite spices, but the price keeps going up, and then thinking, screw it, I'll just go get it myself. In summary, the combination of religious zeal, political ambitions, and economic policies and technological advancements spurred European exploration and colonization of the Americas. They didn't just wake up one day and decide to go on a road trip. It was a perfect storm of motivations that led them to set sail and change the world. Now that the Europeans were all pumped up to find new routes and explore new lands, let's chart their adventures. Imagine a race where everyone is trying to find the best shortcut to the treasure. Our trusty map has color-coded the early routes. Light purple for the Spanish, green for the Portuguese, orange for the French, and dark purple for the Dutch. The English, fashionably late as always, became significant in the 17th century, like their friend who shows up just in time for dessert. Let's zoom in let's zoom in on Columbus's escapades. Christopher Columbus hailed from Genoa, a coastal city-state in northwestern Italy, known for its strong navy and bustling trade scene. Imagine growing up in Genoa as Columbus did. It's like living in a shipping hub surrounded by sailors and merchants. Columbus was exposed to all kinds of trade-related gossip, sparking his interest in geography and literature. This curiosity led him to dream of sailing west to reach Asia, aiming to score big in the ancient markets. Columbus spent many years in Portugal, where he initially pitched his westward plan to the Portuguese monarchy, but the Portuguese, being skeptics of Columbus's geographical judgment, decided to focus on the eastward route around Africa to India. So they gave Columbus a polite but firm no thank you. Undeterred, Columbus turned to the Spanish monarchy. After years of persistency, he finally convinced Isabella and Ferdinand. So Spain, eager to outdo Portugal and enhance its wealth and status, decided to take a gamble on Columbus. Interestingly, Columbus's voyage was financed by Italian bankers, reflecting Spain's financial constraints and the need to share risks. It's like the original crowdfunding campaign, but with fewer tweets and more gold doubloons. Columbus eventually reached Guanahani Island, where he encountered the Taino people. He promptly renamed it San Salvador and called the Taino Indians, mistakenly thinking he had reached in Asia. Even though Columbus didn't find the expected gold, silk, or spices, he believed he was close to the Asian mainland. His return to Spain stirred immense interest, encouraging more Europeans to explore the Caribbean and American continents. This marked the end of isolation between the Western and Eastern hemispheres and the start of close contact. It was like the first season of a hit reality show. Everyone wanted a piece of the action. Despite Columbus never acknowledging that he hadn't reached Asia, his voyages increased tensions between Spain and Portugal. To avoid conflict, Pope Alexander VI proposed an imaginary dividing line in 1493, splitting the new lands between Spain and Portugal. The Treaty of Tordesillas in 1494 moved this line westward, giving Portugal parts of modern Brazil. This treaty completely ignored indigenous claims, highlighting the arrogance of both nations. It's like two people arguing over who gets the last slice of pizza while the pizza itself just wants to be left alone. Meanwhile, France sponsored the Italian navigator Giovanni da Verrazzano's quest for a northwest passage to Asia. They were like, we need a shortcut. French explorer Jacques Cartier later ventured into eastern Canada, paving the way for France's colonization in North America and the establishment of New France. However, internal conflicts delayed France's transatlantic efforts. The 16th century wars with Spain, Italy, and other European countries, coupled with religious conflicts between Catholics and Huguenots, kept France occupied. It was like trying to organize a road trip while your car is on fire. Finally, with the Edict of Nantes, ending these religious wars, France, under the powerful monarchy of Louis XIV, developed a strong interest in overseas colonies in the 17th century. Louis XIV was like, let's get this colonial party started. The Dutch, gaining independence from Spain and in the late 16th century, were also latecomers to the Americas. As a significant maritime power, they engaged in extensive navigation and colonization in the late 16th and 17th centuries, establishing New Netherlands in what is now New York. The Englishman Henry Hudson, serving the Dutch, explored the Hudson River, Hudson Bay, and Hudson Strait, all named after him. It's like he was determined to leave his name on everything, like a teenager with a can of spray paint. England's initial foray into the New World included John Cabot's exploration of Newfoundland's coast in the late 15th century. However, significant religious conflicts in the 16th century delayed England's overseas exploration efforts. It's hard to focus on finding new lands when you are busy arguing about whose church hat is the fanciest. By the late 16th century, under Queen Elizabeth I, England began challenging Spanish dominance at sea, leading to successful colonization efforts in North America. Queen Elizabeth I was basically like, Spain, step aside, it's our turn now. By the 17th century, Europeans were all over the Americas like sprinkles on a donut. The British and Dutch grabbed chunks of the North American East Coast. The French controlled the northern and interior regions down to the Gulf of Mexico, and the Spanish ruled the American Southwest, Central America, and parts of South America. It was like a giant game of Risk, but with more boats and fewer dice. Each European power had its own colonial playbook with varying strategies and outcomes. The British were all about settling and farming. The French were into trading and making friends with the locals. The Spanish were focused on conquest and conversion. France and England were the entrepreneurial types, relying on private investors to bankroll their colonies. Think of them as the regional venture capitalists. Meanwhile, Spain and Portugal went for the full royal treatment, with kings and queens directly controlling colonial affairs through viceroyals and royal courts. In the British North American colonies, despite the Crown's authority, colonists had their own assemblies and wielded significant influence over the appointment of royal governors. It was like a colonial version of Who Wants to Be Governor, with the colonists holding the final vote. The English aimed to populate their colonies with British settlers, leading to the displacement of Native Americans rather than integrating with them. The French, on the other hand, played nice, focusing on trade and missionary work rather than large-scale settlement. They were like the friendly neighbors who always brought over a casserole. The Spanish, meanwhile, went all out, establishing extensive colonial rule in Central and South America. Initially, Spanish colonists had a bit of independence, but by the late 16th century, they were firmly under the crown's thumb, with little room for independent political institutions. Economically, the Spanish hit the jackpot with vast amounts of gold and silver, especially from Central and South America. This wasn't the case for the less resource-rich North American colonies. The Spanish imposed strict commercial policies, funneling all trade through a single Spanish port and a few colonial ports, which stifled economic development compared to the more commercially flexible British colonies. Spanish colonists had fewer European settlers, with a small ruling class lording over a large indigenous population. In contrast, British, Dutch, and French colonies quickly established permanent settlements and family life.